Hi, I'm Zach Marvin, and I'm making the next big sports game. If you're new to my channel, I just posted a video last week about coming to a crossroads between working on my previous game Nanoplanet or continuing on this new project. And as you can see by the title of this video, I've decided to continue on this new project. I'm super happy to continue working on it and to share it with you all. So let's go ahead and get started. But right before we get started, if you are interested in Nanoplanet, be sure to hit the playlist. I'll link it right here, or subscribe to my channel. I'll probably still post some videos on it here and there, but my primary focus is going to be on this new sports game that I'm creating. So what sports game am I creating? Well, I picked up a new sport about 6 or 7 months ago called disc golf. It's basically golf, but instead of hitting a golf ball with a club, you throw a frisbee at a basket that has chains on it. It's really interesting because the flight physics of a frisbee are much different than a golf ball. A golf ball has minimal fade and slice based off of the spin on the ball, whereas a frisbee, depending on the shape of it and the mold of it, and depending on the wind direction and how hard you spin it and throw it, it can do all kinds of different things. It can bank off to the right really hard, or bank off to the left, or do an S curve, or if it hits the ground on a steep enough angle, it'll turn into a roller. And then a roller has all kinds of physics as well, depending on the type of disc and the angle it hit the ground. It can either cut left while it's rolling, or it can cut right. And once you really grasp and understand what the different numbers of the disc do and how the disc flies, it's really intriguing. It's just like nerdy disc golf basically, which is right up my alley. In 6 to 7 months, I think I've logged almost 100 rounds on my UDisc app, which records your score. So I'm definitely obsessed. I probably bought a few too many discs, but when I got home, instead of wanting to work on Nanoplanet, I just wanted to work on disc golf forum or watch disc golf videos. And so I was like, well, why don't I combine my two hobbies and make a video game about disc golf? Now, I tried this a couple months ago and I made a little prototype and it wasn't going very well, so I gave up on it pretty quickly. But then about 3 weeks ago, I was like, I'm going to give this another go. It's really intriguing, the idea of a disc golf game. There's only a few of them out there right now, and a couple of them are mobile and a couple of them are VR. So it's a very slim market. So I figured, why not try my hand at it? And it would be a fun learning experience, because I think the biggest part of game development that really intrigues me is it's a fun way to learn new programming concepts. And since I'm a software developer professionally, I figure why not push myself in my hobby, and that'll help me professionally in my day job, and kind of just a feedback loop there. So I always want to be learning something when I'm developing video games. So I wanted to learn a 3D multiplayer game, since I've created plenty of 2D games for game jams and I've already released 2D games. So I kind of figured I'd put Nanoplanet on the back burner. I'm sorry if you're a huge fan of that game. It was coming along really nice, and I may pick it up again in the future, but I really want to focus on a 3D multiplayer game, and I want that game to be about disc golf, which is my other major hobby. So I hope you all are excited, because I'm really excited on all the progress I'm making in multiplayer and 3D, and it's just looking really good and really promising. So hopefully you all enjoyed as much as I do, but let's go ahead and get started on me developing this game. First thing I wanted to do was I wanted to make a 3D world so that you had something to throw a disc in. So I imported Unity's terrain demo, and it looks pretty sweet out of the box. I didn't really have to do much here. And then I added a little player capsule that just sits there and spits out little spheres when you click the button. So it kind of just like throws these balls. Next thing I needed to do was make it actually throw the balls in the air, because it was just kind of throwing them on the ground. So now that it's throwing the balls in the air, I kind of have the physics of a ball. And I was like, well, let me go ahead and turn this ball into a frisbee. So I hopped into Blender and tried my hand at creating a frisbee in Blender. I think it turned out pretty nice. If you know disc golf terms, it's pretty much a mid-range. So I created a little mid-range 3D modeled disc and imported it back into Unity. So now you're throwing a frisbee, and now I wanted to add the physics of the frisbee. This opened a giant wormhole. I thought I understood how a frisbee flied before, but I was really just scratching the surface. I had to do a lot of research and look up a lot of little physics videos on YouTube and a lot of formulas and stuff to recreate the physics of a frisbee in Unity, because as far as I know, Unity doesn't really have like wind drag. It has drag and angular drag, but no sort of like air physics. So I kind of had to replicate a lot of this in there. Like Unity, you can throw a ball and it'll drop, and you can change how much the wind drag affects it in that sense. But there's nothing that's going to tell you, hey, if you have angular torque going in this direction, you need to apply momentum in the opposite direction. So there was a lot of math that I had to do and a lot of tweaking to get the physics of a frisbee to fly the same way that it would in real life. If you don't know disc golf, frisbees have 4 numbers associated with them. They have speed, which is basically the drag of the disc based off of the thickness of the rim and the profile of the side of the disc. Then you have glide, which is how much lift is underneath the disc. And then you have turn and fade. Turn is how much the disc is going to turn in one direction at a really high speed. And then fade is how much it's going to turn in the opposite direction at a really low speed. So I had to program all these physics so that the flight of the disc did those different things based off of the different numbers that the player provided. Also, I needed to incorporate wind, because if you throw a disc into a headwind, the disc is going to think it's flying much faster than it is, so it's going to turn more than it should. And if you're flying in a tailwind, the disc is going to feel like it's flying much slower than it actually is, so it's going to fade more than it typically would on a normal throw without wind. So I went down a huge rabbit hole of developing the physics for a disc based off of these 4 numbers. But now that I had a good prototype for the physics of a disc, I wanted to actually make a player so that you're not just a capsule throwing discs outside of the capsule. So I created a player, or imported a player from Unity's prototype player asset, and had it running around and doing like run and walk animations. Everything was good to go there. Then you could kind of just spit out a disc in front of the player. Now I needed to add an animation so it actually looked like the player was throwing. So I hopped into Blender and tried my hand at 3D animating different throw animations. I created a backhand throw animation, a forehand throw animation, and then a putt animation and a jump putt animation. If you're not familiar with disc golf, putting is inside of 33 feet. That's called circle 1. That's a putt. And then outside of 33 feet up to 66 feet is still a putt, but typically players will do what's called a jump putt, where they throw and then one of their feet leave the ground, or even both of their feet leave the ground. So that's a jump putt and a regular putt. So I wanted to animate those 4 different things so that it actually looked realistic when the player was throwing the disc. Now that I had a player, the terrain, the flight physics of a disc, and the different animations that needed to go with it, I wanted to give the player something to throw at. So I hopped in Blender again and created a disc golf basket with the chains. And then I was able to get the chains working with real physics in Unity. So when you hit a chain, it actually acts like a chain. It moves around in the way that it should. So now the player has something to throw at and can run around. And at this point, I wanted to get my friend who plays disc golf with me to test it out, but I needed to make it multiplayer first. So this was another giant rabbit hole. I never really created a multiplayer game. I decided to go with Unity's netcode for game object solution. This took a couple days to get working and for me to understand the basic concepts. But after a couple days of working on it, I had a prototype working in multiplayer. So I invited my friend to download the game and hop in a lobby. And we hopped in the lobby for like an hour and we're just chucking discs around. Got some pretty good feedback from him. And it was just really fun. I just wanted to stay in the lobby and keep throwing. So I kind of thought, I'm on to something here. This is a pretty fun concept. So after that day of testing it out with my buddy, the next thing I wanted to work on was creating a HUD so the player knew which direction the basket was in, which direction their disc was in, how far the disc was away from them, how far the basket was away from them. So that was the next piece I worked on after playing in the lobby with my buddy. Okay, so now I got multiplayer working, the physics of the disc, the character can move around, the different animations. I've tested out with my buddy, and I have some HUD elements created. Now I wanted to replicate one of the main courses that we play at around here, and that's Hillard Park, Biloxi. So I started replicating Hillard Park, and I placed out all the different pins and tee pads in a general position of where they're going to end up being. And then I started creating the holes. I've created 4 holes so far, and I'm super happy with how it's coming. I even have like tiny little features like a shed on one hole that's in the actual course. There's an actual shed on that hole. Also, I have different landmarks like storage container on another hole, which is actually on the real course. And then when you walk down the fairway of that course, you have to cross the creek. And in real life, you have to walk on these stones to cross the creek. So I added the stones into the game. So it's really cool to like go play disc golf and then come home and hop on my game and go play disc golf on my game too. And to see the real different landmarks that are actually out on the course. So I'm really happy with how it's coming. I've got 4 or 5 of the holes created so far. and the rest just laid out, as well as like where the water is going to run based off of the real life. And I've taken some creative freedom here, like the lake on one of the holes is actually like a splash pad in real life, but I figured a lake would look nicer, so I just take a little bit of creative liberties here and there to make it a little more creative of a process, but still try to stay true to the actual course. And it's coming along really nice. I'm super excited to share it with some of my local players here and have them play it and test it out and get some feedback. But there was one other feature I tried to squeeze in before making this devlog, and that was actually having a running scoreboard. So now there are up to 4 scoreboards based off how many people are in the lobby, and it keeps track of your score as you play the game. If you know golf terms, if you get a birdie, the box turns green and it shows the number associated with it. If you get an eagle, it turns a different color. If you get a bogey, it turns red. Double and triple bogeys are a darker red. If you get an ace or a hole-in-one, there's like a cool little background for it with like a rainbow color. And then it keeps a running tally of your actual score. So it's really cool. I'm really excited to have some players play it. I'm gonna have my buddy test it out again on multiplayer and iron out any kinks that have popped up since the last time we hopped in a multiplayer lobby. But if you're interested in playing the game as well, or if you're interested in these videos, or you just like hearing me talk, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button and let me know what you think about the game in the comments below, or some features you'd like to see added. And if you would like to play it yourself, go ahead and join our Discord, because I'm going to be hopping in a lobby after I test it out with my buddy. I'm going to hop in a lobby with some Discord members and kind of get some general feedback from the Discord community. So that's all I have for today. I'm super excited for the project, and I'm going to be posting devlogs about that project here regularly. So if you're really interested in that, make sure to hit the subscribe button. But until next time, happy coding.